Hey guys, hope you are all doing well. I got a bit of a sunburn on my nose, but other than that, I'm doing okay. So this will be the last teaching video for Lord of the Flies. So this will be 11 and 12, which are intense. So if you've already read it, you know. But yeah, it's such a fun read. Even every time I reread it, I'm like sweating and like excited and like, oh my god. Okay, so lastly, we left off with Jack and his new crew stole Piggy's glasses, and we know Piggy is extremely blind and cannot see. So this is going to create an issue, as well as they use the glasses to create fire. So that creates another issue. Okay, so the chapter called Castle Rock starts off with Ralph like trying to create fire. A great figurative language I like is like the gray, feathery, ashy scurried hither and thither at his breath, but no spark shone among them. Because I feel like we can all relate to that when you like blow on a fire or trying to get it started again. It's like that feathery look to it. So I really like that one. So it's basically the twins, Sam and Eric, Piggy, and Ralph are like the only ones kind of left. And we see Ralph really exhibit strong rage at the bottom of page 187, like rage shrilled in his voice. They stole it, and Piggy kind of confirms that, right? Like, yeah, they blinded me. That's Jack Meridew for you, basically. And so he's trying to encourage Ralph again to like call an assembly, like, so the conch still is a prominent symbol right to the end. I know I saw in your Lit Circle comments, some of you are like, I think it'll grow less important, maybe, and like different ideas. But we see that it's very interesting that this object, and the way it's described is always like its beauty, its white shine, showing the importance of it. And so it's interesting that it has this power over these boys because it represents maybe like society, the assembly, when things were good at one point. Okay. And so Piggy's trying to encourage him to blow it. And so again, like on page 188, he held the shining thing carefully and blinked at Ralph. I just take the conch to say this. We have to get my glasses back. I voted for you, Chief. Da la la. And then he starts to lecture them again, right? Like, are you guys savages or what? Don't you remember? We need to get rescue. Remember when that ship went by and we didn't have the signal fire going? It's his fault, right? Meaning Jack. So Ralph's like really going on a tangent. Like Piggy tried to speak up, starts sniveling, crying because he's upset, obviously. And then Ralph just comes in like full force. And he's very angry, right? So you can see he wants to like defend Piggy. And he's mad still about that ship. And then on top of page 189, then Piggy's like asking for the conch. And he's like, I really just want my glasses back. And so again, we see, I'm trying to think, like, suppose we all go and like we brush our hair and look like we used to. So again, wanting that civilized look, like civilized nature, not savages with like face paint all crazy. And it says, after all, we aren't savages really, and being rescued isn't a game. So, you know, I keep talking about that reference to like game and fun, right? Like he realizes the severity of the situation. And again, like Piggy's like, you haven't got the conch, and he's like holding up the shell and like no one really responds, but Piggy's the one that like really holds on to the conch being important, and he holds on to it for dear life. Okay, and so he says, like, I'll have to be led like a dog now, anyhow, like, go on, laugh at me, but, like, literally, he's helpless, because they're saying if we go take spears and, like, try and get them, and he's lecturing, what are grown-ups gonna think? Young Simon was murdered, where's the guy with the mark on his face? Who's seen him? Like, recounting the deaths they've experienced on the island and how it's, like, changed them. And they're like, Piggy, like, stop a minute. I got the conch, and I'm gonna get that Jack Meridew and tell him I am. And so Piggy's kind of like bold and brazen now and like fed up with Jack. Like, I'll tell him, I don't care. Let me carry the conch, Ralph. I'll show him the one thing he hasn't got. I'm going to him with this conch in my hands. I'm going to hold it out and say, look, you're stronger than I am. You haven't got asthma. And he's saying what he's going to say to him. But you have to give my glasses back. Basically, what he's saying is because what's right is right. He's so, like, virtuous and adult-like. Like, you don't steal from others and you give back their property. Like, he is being, like, this proper British boy of, like, we should follow the rules and should not treat each other like this. And even in the end, he's flushed, he's trembling, like, he's unsure of what he's saying, but he, like, knows it's right. And then he pushes the conch back into Ralph's hands, kind of to be rid of it. But again, how it's described on page 190, like, you could add that to that doc that you're working on. It's fragile, it's white, like this delicate drop of water. So it's, the way it's viewed, right, is still important. And then Sam is kind of saying, like, well, they're going to be, like, painted. Like, what are we going to do? As if, like, the mask they create is a power, right? But it does make them more savage. Okay, and so then Ralph gives Piggy back the conch to, like, carry. And it's like he's flushed with pride because he gets to carry this important item, right? And Ralph says, you must carry it. Piggy sought in his mind for words to convey his passionate willingness to carry the conch against all odds. So 190, it's like this sacrificial moment. He's like, yes, even though I can't see, I will take this conch and lead it to the promised land. I don't know. Okay, and so Ralph is suggesting on, like, 191, like, they should, like, tie their hair up or, like, clean themselves and try and look more civilized. And on the middle of page 191, they understood only too well the liberation into savagery that the concealing paint brought. Like, that's such a great quote to show, like, how the masks really, like, the face paint creates savagery. Like, that is just, like, the epitome of that whole idea in that quote. Well, we won't be painted, said Ralph, because we aren't savages. So understanding the difference of how, like, painting your face and acting a fool is, like, what's separating them. And he's like, no paint. And he's, like, yelling it because he wants to be civilized. He's like, we need smoke. That's all we get. And he, yeah. And so Piggy again is reiterating, like, yes, because remember, if we don't have smoke, we don't have a signal, and then we won't be saved. And he says, I knew that, shouted Ralph. He pulled his arm away from Piggy. Are you suggesting? So he's getting frustrated with him. That's on the bottom of page 191. He's frustrating that, like, Piggy's almost treating him like he doesn't know what he's doing or doesn't know what he's talking about. And so Piggy is saying, oh, I'm just saying the things you always says. He says hastily. I thought for a moment. So he says to me, like, I just thought you forgot. I was just reminding you. And he's like, I hadn't, said Ralph loudly. I knew all the time. I hadn't forgotten. And then Piggy nodded. And that word, like, propaganically is meaning just, like, appeasingly, like, trying to, like, please and, like, make Ralph feel good. But he's like, you're Chief Ralph. You remember everything. I hadn't forgotten. Of course not. And then a really important quote there is, like, the twins were examining Ralph curiously as though they were seeing him for the first time. So it's like Piggy has the brains behind Ralph. And they're, like, we knew that as the reader, but we could see that clearly, like, this whole time. But now the other boys are finally like, huh, Ralph really was, like, not as, like, maybe great or, like, smart as they thought. Like, Piggy was the one really, like, behind the scenes. So yeah, now they're all, I love the line on 192, like, behind him came the twins, working out for a while, but full of unquenchable vitality. Like, they're just like, woo, gung-ho, ready to go. And so yeah, the dense tangle of the island, the twisted stems, it's impenetrable. They're trying to move forward. So it's kind of showing, like, setting there. That's on the top of page 193, how the setting is, like, what they're facing. It's impenetrable. It's going to be hard. And then they're walking and Piggy's nervous. He's like, is there a cliff? Can't see where I'm going. Like, am I safe? I feel awful. And then they start to hear the imitation war cry And what I like about what Golding does, like, he says imitation war cry, because it's like they're imitating. They don't know what they're doing. They're acting like fools, but they're pretending to be savage even though they don't really know what they're doing. So, like, Jack makes his call and everybody responds. And then there's like, give me the conch and stay still. So again, the conch is still present and having control. On the top of page 194, it's like, you see who I am, stop being silly. He put the conch to his lips and began to blow. Savages appeared, painted out of recognition, edging around the ledge towards the neck. They carried spears. Ralph went on blowing and ignored Piggy's terrors. And so he's like, I'm calling and assembling, but no one's really like doing anything. And Piggy kind of like crouches down because he's nervous. And then Roger, who we've known to be like a psychopath this whole time, who was like throwing rocks at little ones and like loves destroying things and hurting people. So Roger, on the bottom of page 194, Roger took a small stone and flung it between the twins, aiming to miss. So he's like missing on purpose, but it's like he's taunting them, like he wants to hurt them with these rocks. They started, and Sam only just kept his footing. Some source of power began to pulse in Roger's body. So now we see a change in Roger, like he's developing a power. And they're asking where Jack is. And Ralph is saying, like, I've come to see you about the fire and Piggy's glasses. They need to be returned. And they're kind of like laughing, like, oh, whatever. And then Jack, with his red hair and his personality, they know him, recognize him right away. And then they kind of keep walking and Piggy's crying, like, Ralph, don't leave me. And they're laughing at him, right? Jeering at him. And Jack is shouting above the noise, you go away, Ralph. You keep to your end. This is my end and my tribe. You leave me alone. And so the jeering stops, the laughing stops. So showing that Jack does have some respect by the others. When he starts to speak, they all be quiet. And then Ralph's temper comes out, like, you voted for me. Didn't you hear the conch? So again, he's still recognizing the conch's power. You played a dirty trick. We would have given you fire if you asked for it. So again, showing like he is a fair leader, right? He's like, if you would have wanted fire, we would have shared. Like, it's not a big deal. You could have had it whenever you wanted, but you didn't. And you're a thief, right? And stealing Piggy's glasses. And Jack takes offense, like, say it again. Thief, thief. And then Piggy's like, watch out. I'm right here. And so then the rest of the page, like 196, it's like Jack and Ralph kind of like tussling and fighting each other. And like the bottom, like they squared up to each other just out of fighting distance. Like, come on, no, you come on. Like, let's go. Right? Typical men. And so again, Piggy's like trying to give him advice, right? Ralph, remember what we came for, the fire and my specs. And Ralph nodded. He relaxed his fighting muscles, stood easily, and grounded the butt of his spear. So he like calms down and is like, look, you got to give back the glasses. He can't see. You aren't playing the game, right? So again, the game, like, it's not a game. It's real life. And then Piggy again is like, and the fire. Oh, yes, about the fire. I'll say this again. I've been saying it since the start. So he has been saying it, but only because Piggy said it. And then he kind of frightens everybody because he's like, if we do not have a signal fire, a ship might go past. Like, that's our only chance of being rescued, or we'll be here until we're old. And that really affects people. Everyone kind of is like, oh, and like shivery and like listening to him now. And then his voice is like angry. Don't you understand, you painted fools? Sam, Eric, Piggy, and me, we aren't enough. We tried to keep the fire going, but we couldn't. And then you, playing at hunting. So and he's like, you call that a signal fire? That's a cooking fire. So again, he's just lashing out at them, being like, you're children. You don't know what you're doing. And then another great line about the painting, right? On the top of page 198, he paused, defeated by the silence and the painted autonomy of the group guarding the entry. So they all have this, like, autonomy with their painted faces. Like, they don't have to listen to him, or, like, they're in charge of themselves. And then Jack signals for the twins to get, like, tied up. But everyone's kind of, like, uneasy to listen to him at first. Right? He has to repeat himself. I said grab them. And then Sam and Eric protested out of the heart of civilization. So again, civilization versus savagery, right? Like we're seeing that present. So they get tied up. And then the painted group, like they feel power because they're like, ooh, I can tie these guys up. I have control. And then Jack's inspired by this. And then he says to Ralph on page 199, see, they do what I want. So he's become blind with like power and how he can control these boys now. And then Ralph's temper broke and he screams, you're a beast and a swine and a bloody, bloody thief. Charges at him. And he charges back. And so I love the line though too. It's on page 199 still, kind of like halfway down here. They're like panting and furious, but unnerved by each other's ferocity. So they're like, whoa, like this dude's getting violent, I'm getting violent. Like they're like, we're getting really ferocious towards each other. And we shouldn't be behaving this way because we are good little British schoolboys, but they are. So it freaks them out. And then Piggy's voice penetrated to Ralph. Let me speak. He was standing in the dust of the fight. And as the tribe saw his intention, the shrill cheer changed to a steady booing. They're like, boo, no one cares, Piggy. But he held up the conch. And then the booing stopped a little. So again, showing the power of the conch. Piggy holds it up and they're like, boo. Okay, whatever. What's he going to say? I got the conch, he shouted. I tell you, I got the conch. Surprisingly, there was a silence now. The tribe were curious to hear what amusing thing he might have to say. So again, the conch does still hold some power. And then Roger starts dropping rocks. As you know, we just said, Roger's a psycho with throwing rocks, dropping rocks. Has it on like this lever. And he describes how like looking down, like Ralph was just a sock of hair and Piggy was a bag of fat. Like they look so small. And so Piggy again starts to lecture them. You're acting like a crowd of kids. And how the conch is described. So the top of page 200 lifted the white magic shell. Like magic, it has power. Like they all listen to it. Now, you'll notice on the top of page 200, there's a very, very bad word that you should never speak. And you'll know it when you see it. We have to remember that this context of the book, right? Written in 1954. And the analogy they're making. So it's obviously extremely derogatory, but they're saying like that group of people are like savages or like have no control. You understand what's being compared. Okay, so Piggy is saying like, how can you act like a group of painted faces, this type of people? Or are you going to be sensible like Ralph? So again, he like puts Ralph on a pedestal to everybody. He pumps Ralph's tires. He's basically the one that made everyone vote for him as chief. Which is better, to have rules and agree or to hunt and kill? So again, he is very wise and giving it to them straight. And so that's very much that civilization versus like savagery. And then the clamor again. Ralph shouted against the noise. Which is better, law and rescue or hunting and breaking things up? And then Jack starts yelling. And so it's a solid mass of menace that bristle with spears. So they're all kind of fighting and tussling. And then Piggy still holding out the talisman. So again, how the conch is described is very important. The fragile, shining beauty of the shell. The storm of sound beat at them. An incantation of hatred. High overhead, Roger, with a sense of delirious abandonment, leaned all his weight on the lever. Okay, guys, brace yourselves. So they hear the rock coming. The monstrous red thing bounded across the neck, and he flung himself flat while the tribe shrieked. The rock struck Piggy, a glancing blow from chin to knee. The conch exploded into 1,000 white fragments and ceased to exist. Piggy, saying nothing, with no time for even a grunt, traveled through the air sideways from the rock, turning over as he went. The rock bounded twice and was lost in the forest. Piggy fell 40 feet and landed on his back across that square red rock in the sea. His head opened and stuff came out and turned red. Piggy's arms and legs twitched a bit, like a pig's after it had been killed. Then the sea breathed again in a long, slow sigh. The water boiled white and pink over the rock And when it went sucking back again, the body of Piggy was gone, just like Simon's did. So beloved Piggy is no more because of psycho Roger and his rock throwing. And so it's very important that you realize, like, the conch is gone with Piggy. Like, there's a reason that Golding wrote for them to, like, the conch to explode and Piggy to be crushed in sync together, right? They both were symbolic of, like, what is right, what is just, like Piggy lecturing them. The conch is what brought them together, and now those are both gone. So obviously we can infer that things are just going to go way downhill from here. So it's an extremely pivotal moment that this happened. And then Jack is saying, see, that's what you get. The conch is gone. There's no tribe anymore. So again, those things were tied together. Justice, ruling, society, Piggy and the conch really put that together. And then viciously, with full intention, so now he's really trying to kill Ralph, hurled his spear at Ralph. The point tore the skin and flesh over Ralph's ribs. And now the twins, like, they lay hidden behind the tribe and the anonymous devil faces. Ralph turned and ran, and he obeyed an instinct that he did not know he possessed and swerved over the open space so the spears went wide. So he's literally having, like, this survival instinct take over, and he's like, ah, they gonna kill me. I gotta get going. Okay. What's really important, too, is on page 202, how they describe, like, when Roger comes down, right? Jack's like, what were you doing? Why were you on watch? And it's the hangman's horror clung to him. So right now, the hangman, obviously, he was the executioner. He killed Piggy. And there is that horror. So he is a little bit petrified at this moment of what he's done. So definitely loss of innocence there. Obviously, he's going to take it and run with it and be like, now I'm even more of a psycho. Woohoo. But yeah, and so the chief, Jack, he snatched a few stirrups. He's poking Sam in the ribs. Sam's yelling. He's in pain. He looks at Roger in terror. And then Roger advanced upon them as one wielding a nameless authority. That last line. So Roger is, like, really gone over the edge and is insanely cruel. He did kind of care about killing Piggy, but not really. And now, from this moment on, he's accepted he's killed Piggy. He doesn't care about life, or, like, he's become so savage and animalistic. He's just ready to, like, kill whoever. Okay, the last chapter, Cry of the Hunters. Okay, so Ralph, he's hiding. He's knows that they're trying to kill him. And yeah, he's, like, hard to pick out the boys. Like, it's hard to remember what they used to look like. That's on, like, 203. And then on 204, he argued unconvincingly that they would let him alone, so he knows that they're going to come get him. The breaking of the conch and the deaths of Piggy and Simon lay over the island like a vapor. So it's very symbolic, right? Like, the boys' deaths and the conch disappearing, it's, like, hovering around him and, like, this audible or, like, tangible vibe going on. These painted savages would go further and further, so he knows that there's no end and that savagery is just going to increase. And then there was that indefinable connection between himself and Jack, who therefore would never let him alone, never. So he knows that Jack will not rest until he's dead. And then he finds some fruit and eats it very greedily and makes some little ones cry because he probably looks like a wild madman. And then he realizes, like, no fire, no smoke, no rescue. Like, that's still on his mind. And then on page 205, he comes across the skull, right? That Simon, the Lord of the Flies, that Simon had saw. And, like, he says the pig skull grinned at him from the top of the stick. And he looked at it, and it gleamed as white as ever the conch had done and seemed to jeer him cynically, so with, like, negativity. An inquisitive ant was busy in one of the eye sockets, but otherwise the thing was lifeless. Or was it? Little prickles of sensation ran up and down his back. He stood, the skull about on a level with his face, and held up his hair with 2 hands. The teeth grinned, the empty socket seemed to hold his gaze masterfully and without effort. What was it? So again, it's like that devil, right? It regarded Ralph like one who knows all the answers but won't tell. A sick fear and rage swept him. And then he fiercely starts to like beat it with his hands, like punch it. And his knuckles are like bruised. And he just basically destroys it down to nothing. He knelt among the shadows and felt his isolation bitterly. They were savages, it was true, but they were human. And the ambushing fears of the deep night were coming on. So it's becoming to be night, and he's like, I get that they're savages and they're crazy, but they're still human boys, so they might still have fear. And he realizes he's an outcast, right? And he says, because I had some sense. So it's like remembering Piggy, like remembering like, I'm only an outcast because I want to be saved and I know the truth and blah, blah, blah. And then he hears the tribe dancing and doing their chant. And then he notices two shadows and that the only boys that move like that are Sam and Eric. So he realizes they've joined the tribe. But we know that it's like against their will. I mean, they were tied up. Ralph put his head down on his forehands and accepted this new fact like a wound. So it's like sore to him. It's like a cut or something that the boys have now joined the other side. Sam and Eric were savages like the rest. Piggy was dead and the conch smashed to powder. So again, the conch is like level with like the other deaths. Like it's all a loss for him. And then he's saying, like, he's talking to Sam and Eric while they're on their watch, like, it's me. And memory of their new and shameful loyalty came to them. This is on page 208. And they're trying to tell him, like, go, get out of here. Like, we're supposed to be watching. And his throat was hurting him now, though it had received no wound. And he's like, but I came to see you guys. Like, see how you guys are doing. And so words could not express the dull pain of these things. So he just feels, honestly, so betrayed. But they explained to him on the top of page 209 that, like Roger and Jack, like, hurt them physically. Like, they're definitely using, like, intimidation as power and physically abusing them to get what they want. And Ralph's so confused, like, what have I even done? Like, I wanted us to be rescued. And the twins tell them, like, dude, they hate you. They're going to hunt you to death. Like, there's no way around it. And, like, basically tomorrow we're hunting until we find you and kill you. And he's like, but I haven't done anything wrong. I only want to keep the fire. Like, what's going on? And they're warning him, like, you don't know what Roger is like. Okay, so that's 210. Roger, he's a terror. And the chief, they're both terrors. Only Roger, both boys froze. So they're, like, scared. They're so fearful of him because of the evils he's done to them in this short amount of time. So this boy is, like, pure evil. And definitely symbolic of, like, the devil or, like, what the Lord of the Flies was talking about. But an act of, like, empathy, Sam gives Ralph a big chunk of meat to, like, last him over. And they're saying, like, they're sharpening a stick on both ends. And Ralph's like, I don't get it. But just like they did for the pig, right? So they're, like, wanting to kill him. And Ralph's kind of comparing himself to a little one, like, in the evening, like, he's whimpering and yawning. And then on 212, on page 212, like, he can hear cries of pain from Sam and Eric, cries of panic, angry voices. So there's basically they're torturing these boys for information. Terrible. And that, again, on, like, 213 at the bottom, a squeal of pain, right? Like, they're using intimidation and abuse as power. On the top of 214, right, the twin moaned faintly and then squealed again. You mean he'd hide in there? Oh, yes. Like, yes. Oh. And they're laughing. So they're abusing these twins and laughing about it. So obviously their innocence as children is completely gone. Like, they are evil and psychopathic. So the tribe is, like, cheering. They're gonna find him. They're heaving more rocks. And then they try and, like, sneak in to where Ralph's hiding on 215. And he, like, sticks his spear with all his might. And they're like, oh, I told you he'd be, like, scary to deal with. And then again, like, kind of, like, more hints of, like, torture. Like, he heard a savage say no in a shocked voice. And there was suppressed laughter. And then there's smoke. And basically what they realize is... Or, like, Ralph's wondering, like, what do I do, right? He's at a loss. There was no Piggy to talk sense. There was no solemn assembly for debate nor dignity of the conch. So another great line for the conch. That's 218, like, right here. So Ralph's just at a loss. I don't have Piggy. to help me talk this through, and the conch, like, there's no dignity left in us. So that's really important. And so he hears this deep grumbling noise as though the forest itself were angry with him. And that's still on 218. And then 219, we realize that Jack has essentially lit the whole island on fire without thinking. So that shows again what a careless child he is, because they're burning like all the trees for shelter, all the trees also that have fruit, and then all the animals, so the pigs. So like, what are you going to eat? Where are you going to sleep? What are you going to burn? Like, such a rash and reckless decision, but that's how Jack thought as a child. Like, he only saw like this far in front of him. And so, like, Ralph's freaking out, like, can't a fire outrun a galloping horse? And the, like, tangles of the creepers, like, he's trying so hard to get away. And again, not caring about all the little ones that are on the island, too. Like, oh, here's a giant fire. Just, like, do what you can. Get away. Top of page 220, like, great heaviness of smoke lay between the island and the sun. So just, that's scenery. And, like, 221, a herd of pigs came squealing out of the greenery behind the savage and rushed away into the forest. Birds were screaming, mice shrieking, and a little hopping thing came under the mat and cowered. So everything is scared. Everything is being confronted by the evil actions of these boys for lighting the whole gosh darn island on fire. And then Ralph, bottom of page 221, right? He's screaming, he's running, he's trying to, like, he's fearful for his life. The fire is coming towards him, and he says, like, he forgot his wounds, his hunger and thirst, and became fear. So fearful of, like, the other boys, fearful of the fire, and he's running and running and running, and then all of a sudden, on page 222, there's a naval officer, and he's sitting down looking at Ralph with wary astonishment, and Ralph is like, hello. And then he becomes very conscious of his filthy appearance, because he shouldn't be presented this way in front of, like, a naval officer, not like he had a choice. And the officer's saying, like, oh, was this all fun and games? Obviously, it was, like, anything but that. But again, there's that, like, fun games. Like, he's like, oh, are you guys playing war? Like, are you guys having a good time with your little spears? And he's like, yeah, no, actually 2 people have died so far. Like, I'm freaking out. And this guy's like, what? You mean they're killed? Like, he's shocked by this fact. And Ralph's like, mm-hmm. And then all the other boys are appearing. Some of them, like the little ones. This is all page 223. And then 224, the officer says, like, who's the boss here? I am, said Ralph loudly. And he says it with pride, like, I am the chief. I was voted chief. I'm still the chief. Jack ain't got nothing on me. Okay, and then there's, like, little boys showing up, right? But notice how Jack's described. A little boy who wore the remains of an extraordinary black cap on his red hair and who carried the remains of a pair of spectacles at his waist started forward, then changed his mind and stood still. So such a coward, right? He's saying, who's in charge? And Jack made this whole big stink about how he's the best and has been acting so cruel. But now he's a little boy. He shrunk him to nothing, and he doesn't say anything. He doesn't say, like, no, I'm chief, like, I'm the boss. So extremely cowardly. I just love that part, that Ralph's like, no, I'm chief, and Jack doesn't even try and debate it. And then this officer is saying, like, I would have thought that you are good British boys and men and that you would behave better than this, and be able to put up a better show. And Ralph says, like, we tried, and it was like that up until, like, things changed, until Jack went all savage on us. And then the officer's like, oh yeah, it's like this jolly good show, like Coral Island. And Ralph's looking at him like he has this fleeting memory of, like, what an island would be like if it was fun. But now for him, it's changed, right? The innocence of the island for him is lost. He only sees it now as, like, a place of death. And so he begins crying, and it's, like, taking over his whole body. He's finally releasing all the emotions he's carried as a leader and for all the other boys this whole time. His loss of Simon and loss of Piggy, loss of the conch, and just shaking and spasming his whole body. And that sets a chain reaction. All the other little boys start crying as well. And then my favorite line ever, like, Ralph wept for the end of innocence, the darkness of man's heart, and the fall through the air of true wise friend called Piggy. So he's mourning like the loss of innocence for them all. He's mourning the fact that he realized that men in their hearts maybe are inherently evil, like Roger or like Jack. And just mourning like, I've learned all these lessons like too early in life, and I've also lost friends of mine. And then there's a bit of like that toxic masculinity at the end, like the officer's like embarrassed by them crying, and he's like turns away, like kind of like, pull yourselves together, you good British boys, like you shouldn't be crying. And I'm like, these children have been alone on the island for who knows how long, and like they're traumatized, and you're telling them basically like suck it up, or like not consoling them. But that just shows too like that time period, and that they are like British soldiers and like should behave better. And yeah, they and so they see the trim cruiser in the distance, and so they're going to be rescued, only because Jack did light the whole island on fire. So they saw all that smoke, and that's what really got their attention. So it was good that he did it, but he's also like evil and psycho. And so yeah, that is the end of the book, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Oh, so good. And make sure you ask me if you have any questions, and look for the essay topic.